Hello everyone. I hope I'm audible, sir.
Yeah, you're audible.
So welcome everyone to today's webinar on Demystifying Labour Code Series. The topic is Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions. We are delighted to have Mr. Vardhan sir, our SI veteran carrying 30 years of expertise in labour law and strategic compliance. As the Chief Consultation Officer at Aprachita Corporate Services, he has played a key role in shaping the organization's flagship compliance managed service since 2005, bringing much clarity and practical insights to the discussion. Before we start with the session, I would request everyone to post their questions in the Q&A section. We will address them after the session gets over. Now I'll ask Mr. Vardhan sir to enlighten us.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya, for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity again. Very good evening, each of the participants. I think we are discussing for the third time, first time post the implementation of codes. In fact, we had one first webinar more to highlight the changes on all the 4 codes. And then we had one session exclusively on code on wages. I think today's session, it is on occupational safety, health and working conditions code. So the idea is we are planning for a series of programs with intention to create awareness and also make the corporates prepared for the implementation of the new codes. So that is the idea. So with this small thing, I'll just move on my presentation part. Yeah, so again, code on wages will consist of these 4 legislations earlier prior to 2111, the Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Wages, Payment of Bonus, and the Equal Remuneration Act 1976. Then the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code. This will contain the 13 legislations which you are seeing on your screen, starting from the Factories Act, Mines Act, Contract Labor, Interstate Migrant Workmen, till the Cine Workers and Cinema Theatre Workers Act. Right. So I think today's discussion will be based on the points under these 13 legislations. Then the third one is code on social security. Starts with employees' compensation. Then ESI, PF, employment exchanges, maternity benefit, payment of gratuity. Yes, we have 9 such legislations. Now these legislations would now be subsumed into one code called Code on Social Security. Then finally, the Industrial Relations Code, the Trade Unions Act, the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act, and the Industrial Disputes Act. So this is how it is now distributed. So instead of 29 central labor laws, we will continue to have 4 codes, right? So the point is, even though these legislations are now repealed, the idea will continue. The concept will continue. The concept of PF will continue. The concept of minimum wages will continue. The concept of equal remuneration will continue. Right, the concept of standing orders will continue. The idea will continue, right? So instead of being a separate legislation governing these things, instead this will now remain into probably one chapter under the respective codes. This is how it is. Probably code on wages. Yes, this is how the chapters are arranged. Chapter 1 to chapter 4, again it contains equal remuneration, minimum wages, payment of wages, and payment of bonus. So instead of separate legislation called Equal Remuneration Act, it will be now Equal Remuneration Chapter under Code on Wages, right? So the idea will continue to be there. So there shall not be any discrimination with respect to wages or any other matters connected to employment between the various genders. That is the idea. Earlier, it was only between men and women, but now men, women, and also third gender. There cannot be any discrimination solely because of the gender. So that is how it is going to be. So the idea will continue. The concept will continue. So based on that only, we will continue to maintain the statutory registers, statutory returns, and the statutory notices and other aspects, right? So the number per se could come down. Absolutely no doubt in that. And that is one of the main ideas of bringing in these codes. So numbers would come down, but the efforts, the same efforts we may have to continue to put on for staying compliant with whatever is applicable, whether it is one single code or multiple codes. And yeah, this is on occupational safety, health and working conditions code. So we have 13 chapters and 3 schedules. Then chapter 11 is further divided into 7 parts. On your right, you can see. So contract labor, hitherto it was governed by engagement of contract labor was governed by the provisions of the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act 1970. Now it would be by part 1 of chapter 11 of occupational safety code, right? So the idea will continue to be there. Similarly, the interstate migrant workers, it will be by part 2 of chapter 11 of occupational safety code. We may have to get ourselves familiarized with these new section numbers or the parts or the chapters. Then code on social security. Yes, PF is there. Chapter 3. ESI is there. Gratuity, maternity benefit, employees compensation, other social security benefits. And the chapter 13 is the employment information and monitoring. That is the current Employment Exchanges Act. So the employment exchanges would now be known as career centers, right? It will be it can be a physical office or it can be an electronic platform. That is also possible now, where the job seekers and the job providers again will meet, and probably depending upon their requirement, they will utilize or they will utilize the office. That is how it is going to be. The trade unions, chapter 4 is the standing orders, and the rest of the chapters in red font, it is all part of the chapters currently under Industrial Disputes Act. That continues to be there, right? So one major change is machineries are now changing. We have earlier, prior to 2111, we had conciliation officers, we had board of conciliation, we had court of inquiry, and we had labor courts, right? Now I think instead of board of conciliation, the court of inquiry, the labor court, it would be now handled by the industrial tribunals or the national tribunal. Of course, conciliation officer will be there. In case if the conciliation fails, now I think prior to 2111, it would next stage, it would go to the labor court. So instead of labor court, now it would go to the industrial tribunal, right? If the subject is of national importance, or if the subject impacts the interest of the establishment situated in more than one state, then that will get referred to the national tribunal. That is how it is going to be. So that is the, again, major change with respect to the machineries provided for settling the disputes under the erstwhile Industrial Disputes Act that is coming through the new Industrial Relations Code. Yeah, I move on. Yes, this I think we saw even during our earlier discussions on code on wages. Just to understand quickly, specifically with respect to occupational safety, health and working conditions code. So instead of 13 legislations, it is becoming 1. Right. All these 13 legislations put together, it had 566 sections. Instead, now the codes will have, the occupational safety code will have only 143 sections. The number of rules based on the central rules under the 13 central rules, it was 868. That is coming down to 161. Right. The number of terms defined from 141, it is becoming 65. Please look at the occupational safety, health and working conditions code column, 2 columns, comparative figure that will give. Returns, it will come 1 instead of the multiple returns, 20 returns. The registers, instead of 87, it is going to be 4. Abstracts to be displayed, instead of 6, it is going to be only 1. Again, the statutory notices, instead of 25, it is going to be 5. Just to give you the number. So number per se will come down definitely, right? But look at the returns, which is coming down from 20 to 1. But the efforts to prepare this one return, I think you may have to have the same efforts. You may have to put in the same efforts while you were preparing 20 returns. The same efforts you may have to put to prepare this one return, because the contents will be high, right? So this will contain all the core points which all the earlier 20 registrations were containing. That is how it is going to be. I move on. Yeah, I think this is again the wage definition. I think a lot of times we have already discussed on the definition. I just move on to the sample. Still, if we have any doubt on that, then we'll come back to the wage portion, or otherwise I'll try to explain through the samples. Again, yes, sample one, simple structure. The monthly gross is 18,000, right? The basic works out to 6,000. And HRA, conveyance allowance and commission, all these three are considered to be the excluded allowances, right? So excluded part, this will not be treated as part of wages, though part of gross wage. So this will continue to be gross wage, but it will fall under the exclusion part. So inclusion part, it is only basic, and it works out to 6,000, 33.3%, right? So this structure is not all right. This is not in line with what the new definition says. So if we continue to have this structure post 2111, then for this structure, the quantum of wage would be treated as at least 9,000, because 50% of monthly gross works out to 9,000, right? So we will have one other, probably if I have to put it like this, one other component called add back wage. That would be 3,000. That will get added to basic, right? So the total wage quantum for this salary structure would become 9,000, right? Earlier, absolutely, there were no issues, because HRA was treated to be part of minimum wages, and all the components we were considering as part of wages. So for many of the cases like ESI or minimum wages, we used to consider reckon 18,000, the monthly gross, right? For certain aspects, we were considering only basic and DA. Now it is very clear. The gross wage, yes, it is there. So for our first challenge is, we may have to very clearly determine what is the gross wage. That is 100% wages. What is it? Then out of the 100%, the wage portion for all purposes should work out to 50%, right? So that is how it is going to be. When we say wage portion, normally it would contain basic and dayness allowance for industries which are perennial in nature. In case of seasonal industries, we can add retaining allowance also, right? So number one, the wage portion should work out to 50% in the monthly gross. That is number one. Number two, the wage portion shall be equivalent to or more than the minimum rates of wages prescribed for that person, right? So two conditions are to be fulfilled. It is not just one condition, which is the 50%, right? So even in case in this structure, if basic happened to be 9,000, other HRA, conveyance, commission happened to be totally 9,000, 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, right? One aspect is, yes, it is getting fulfilled. That is 50% aspect is fulfilled. But we should also ensure that 9,000 wage portion is equivalent to or more than the minimum rates of wages prescribed for that person, right? So this structure should fulfill two purposes. One is it should work out to at least 50%. Another one is that portion shall be equivalent to or more than the quantum of minimum wages applicable to that particular employee. So both the conditions are there, crucial. Then yes, we saw this even earlier. This is where we pay mere minimum rates of wages. This can happen particularly with respect to contract workers and the casual workers. So I have here assumed 12,000 as minimum wage, right? And case one, I think it is split into basic 10,000, DA 2,000, right? But of course, basic and DA, both the components are considered to be part of wages, right? So the entire 12,000 in case one would be treated as wages. It is also equivalent to minimum rates of wages. So this structure is all right. With respect to case two, there is no split up at all. So it is a mere consolidated pay of 12,000. So we can basic. We will normally consider consolidated pay as basic only. So this amount quantum will be considered for all purposes, and it is also equivalent to the minimum rates of wages. So it is all right. When it comes to the question of case three, it is split into basic 10,000 and HRA 2,000, right? I think normally employers tend to do like this. This might have worked out earlier, but now post 2111, post the implementation of course, this may not be all right because HRA is not considered to be part of wages, right? One thing you can see is, as I said earlier, basic is much more than 50% of the total remuneration, right? So total is 12,000 only. 50% works out to 6,000, but basic is 10,000. So we have 4,000 more there, right? That condition is fulfilled, but this 10,000 is not equivalent to or more than minimum rates of wages. It is less than minimum wage, right? So this split up may not work out in future post the implementation of the codes. Yeah, I move on. So earlier, probably last time when we met for code on wages, we saw a lot of samples and also its impact for various purposes like PF, ESI, bonus, gratuity, all those stuffs. But now I'm restricting myself to overtime and leave encashment, right? Because these two are crucial for the occupational safety code. One thing is earlier, other samples we already discussed. Another one is now what is relevant for today's discussion, occupational safety, is overtime and leave encashment. Again, I have come up with a salary structure. The monthly gross comes to 32,000, right? Out of the 32,000, the basic and DA, it works out to 14,000, which is less than 50%, right? So the exclusion portion is 18,000, which is more than 50%. So this structure per se is not all right. This is not in line with law, right? But if we continue to have this structure, then we may have to assume 50% of the monthly gross as salary for any purpose, particularly under Occupational Safety Code. Occupational Safety Code also defines the term wages in the same manner as it is defined under Code on Wages, right? So same thing only. So we have to assume that 60,000, which is the 50% of monthly gross as wages for the purposes of OT, right? Now this 16,000 will be considered to be the monthly wage. So for calculating per day wage, it is to be divided by 26. Again, divided by 26, this guidance is given under the codes. So to arrive at per day wage, the monthly wage is to be divided by 26 for the purposes of calculating OT. So roughly that comes to 615, right? So 615 is the per day wage, daily wage, 1 day wage, right? Again, now this 615 is to be divided by number of working hours on a particular day in the respective company. Say, for example, if 8 hours is the working hours, then this 615 is to be divided by 8, which will give the per hour wage. Then, keeping that as a base, we may have to work on the overtime calculation and in quantum, depending upon the number of hours a person has worked. That is how it is going to be. That is the change because of the change in the definition of the term wages. Earlier, it could have been in two ways. Either the companies would have considered only basic and DA for calculating overtime. That is, in this example, they would have considered only 14,000, right? Or some companies would have considered the entire gross pay, that is 32,000. These two things were in practice earlier, prior to 2111. But now, after the introduction of codes, the position is slightly changing. So we may have to determine what exactly is the wage portion. We have to ensure the wage portion is more than minimum wage. Wage portion works out to more than 50% of the total monthly gross. Then that quantum is to be divided by 26. That will give per day wage. Then whatever X amount we get, that amount is to be divided by 8 or 7 or 7.5, depending upon the number of working hours per day in a company. That will give per hour wage. So that is how it is to be calculated going forward. Now, LLP is leave on loss of pay and leave encashment, right? I think I have considered the same salary structure for sample. So here also the 50% works out to 16,000. So there is no change in us, change in this particular aspect in deciding the wage quantum. And this will be applicable when we calculate leave on loss of pay under Occupational Safety Code. Similarly, when we calculate quantum for leave encashment under Occupational Safety Code, not for other purposes. If we are doing it under different legislation, say for example, State-Specific Shops and Establishments Act, then you may have to follow the definition given under that act for the term wage. Based on that only you may have to calculate. This is very specific to where we calculate leave encashment or quantum for loss of pay under Occupational Safety Code, right? I just make it clear. Then, yes, monthly wage quantum is 16,000 here. Here, two things. For calculating the loss of pay, this 16,000 is to be divided by number of paid days, maximum number of days paid in that calendar month. We will be able to ascertain for which calendar month this loss of pay occurs. So it could be 31, it could be 30, it could be 28 or 29. So based on the calendar month for which the loss of pay is being calculated, that number is to be divided by the monthly salary. That will give again per day wage. Then per day wage is to be divided by the number of working hours in a day. Similarly, when it comes to the question of leave encashment, this will arise in two situations. Either after the end of the calendar year, if there are excess number of leave over and above what can be carried over for the next calendar year, then the excess number of days, for that I think amount is to be calculated and leave encashment is to be done, and that is to be paid to the individual concerned, right? This comes under Occupational Safety Code. This may not be the situation earlier, either under the Factories Act or under Shops and Establishments Act, except one or two states, right? But now this provision is there. So the excess leave earlier under Factories Act, it would get lapsed, right? But today under Occupational Safety Code, it may not get lapsed, whereas it is to be encashed. So for calculating that, or second situation is at the time of cessation of service of the employee, for the number of days for which unavailed number of leave days for which amount is to be calculated or paid. For that, again, 16,000 is the monthly gross and monthly wage portion, and this should be divided by 26. So that is also very clear. And this is not specifically mentioned under the codes, right? But I'm suggesting this, taking guidelines, because for minimum wages, we all know for converting the monthly rate into daily rate, it should be divided by 26. And for overtime purposes, it is very clear under the codes, it should be divided by 26 to arrive at per day wage. And we all know, again, even earlier, for calculating gratuity, for arriving at per day wage, the monthly salary is to be divided by 26 again. So taking those things as reference, I'm suggesting here for calculating leave encashment, it can be by dividing the wage portion by 26. I move on. I think, yeah. So these are all certain key points. So you probably one person may have to keep in mind with respect to wages, right? So first thing is to determine clearly the 100%. So there is a confusion among the employers, because I think a lot of questions arise by asking whether how can I consider the quarterly payment? How can I consider the half-yearly payment? How can I consider the 1 year annual payment, right? So I don't think these payments would become part of gross salary, right? So when we say gross salary, it should be paid on a monthly basis, right? And it should be part of the salary. So it can have two categories. One is the wage part, the inclusion part, or the substantive part. Another one is the exclusion part or the allowances part. So irrespective of the number of components one company has, it should be broadly divided into two. One is wage part, wage portion. Another one is exclusion part, right? So we may have to club whatever components we have on a regular monthly basis into only two categories. There, we need not bring in payments which are made based on the policies of the companies, right? Number two, if the payments are made on a periodicity which is above 1 month, I think that need not again become part of salary, monthly salary. Right. So if we are very clear about that, then it will be easy for us to ascertain what exactly is the gross salary, gross wage for a particular person in my company. So once that is done, then I have to ensure the wage part works out to at least 50%. And it is also equivalent to or greater than the minimum wages. I think we discussed all these points. Then in case if the wage part is already more than 50%, then please do not reduce it now. Quoting the new definition. I think that is not the idea. In case in your company, if the wage portion in the monthly gross salary works out to say 60%, you may have to just continue with that. You cannot reduce it to 50%, quoting the new definition. It is not possible, right? Then let us be aware of the flexible payments or variable components we have in our monthly pay, gross pay, right? If it is quarterly, half-yearly, or annual, let us not make it as part of salary record, any of the salary records. Let us not bring it there, right? Then for the OT calculation, we discussed per day wage is to be ascertained by dividing the monthly wage by 26. Then for ascertaining the per hour wage, the per day wage is to be divided by the number of working hours in the shift, regular normal working hours in the company, right? That is how it is going to be. Again, leave encashment calculation we discussed for calculating per day wage for loss of pay. Monthly wages divided by maximum number of days for which salary is paid in that particular calendar month. So that will give per day wage. When it is for calculating the leave encashment, it is better we have it as monthly wages divided by 26 because we are taking a cue from the other areas, minimum wage, gratuity, and OT. That is why this is being suggested, though it is not explicitly mentioned in the codes. Now, I think the wage definition and its impact with respect to probably under Occupational Safety Code we discussed. Now, it is very specific to contract labor. The changes compared to the earlier position. And whatever you are seeing on the screens, it is based on the code on wages. This is not based on the occupational safety. Again, the regular workers of a contractor, right? Now, the contractors themselves, in many cases, happen to be legal entities. They are either proprietorship concern or partnership firm, or they themselves are companies, right? So, and they normally engage two categories of workers for carrying out the obligations arising out of the contract entered into with the principal employer, right? That can be another company. So the two categories of workers, when I say that, probably they may have their own employees. So those employees can also be utilized for this purpose. At the same time, they may engage specifically, they may hire specifically for carrying out this project a set of persons. Both these categories are now considered to be contract workers. So even today, the legal position is regular workers of a contractor. They need not be considered as the contract workers based on the judgment given by the Orissa High Court, right, in Basanta Kumar Mohanty case. But unfortunately, practically what is happening, both the categories of workers today considered to be the contract workers, right? But now under the codes, very clearly in the definition itself, it is excluded. That is, the regular workers of a contractor, they will not be considered as contract workers, right? The next point is the principal employer has to release the consideration, monthly consideration payment to the contractor within 7 days, right? Today, I think it happens after 1 month or 2 months based on whatever agreement both the parties have, right? But idea here is the contract workers are also entitled to receive their wages within 7 days after the end of the wage period. Normally, the wage period will be 1 calendar month. So within 7 days, it should be paid. So for enabling the contractors to make such payment within 7 days, they have to, in the first place, receive the consideration payment from the principal employer, right? So that is another point which is coming up through the code on wages and as well as Rule 55, of course, it is yet to be implemented. Then the principal employer, earlier principal employer was not liable for payment of bonus even if the contractor fails, right? But post to the implementation of codes, the principal employer would be liable if the contractor fails at least to pay the minimum 8.33% of bonus, right? Then the term employer would now include contractor. Even earlier that was the situation, but it was not explicit. But now it is very clearly mentioned in the definition of the term employer that they would include contractors also. Then now what you are seeing on your screens is, yes, the points related to contract labor, but under occupational safety code, emerging out of the occupational safety code. So if there are 20 or more contract workers, then for that principal employer, the act was applicable, the Contract Labor Regulation Abolition Act 1970. Similarly, if there are 20 or more workers engaged by a particular contractor, then the act was applicable to him. Now, that threshold limit of 20 is getting increased to 50. That is going to be again major change. So till 49, the contract labor portion, that is the part 1 of chapter 11 of the occupational code, will not be applicable, right? And the term core activity, it was not defined, but under the codes it is defined, and contractors or contract workers, they cannot be engaged for performing the work under the core activity, right? So earlier, yes, I think there was not very clear definition except in for Andhra Pradesh, but now it is the term core activity is very clearly defined and under the codes, and it is also prohibited to engage contract workers to carry out the core activity. And common license for contractors having operations in multiple states. No provision for common lines. It was not so earlier, but under the codes, the possibility for common license is there, right? Particularly, it was a kind of unit-wise, right? But now the contractors can have common license. It is possible. But of course, we may have to wait for the rules to be implemented as to understand the procedure for the same. But in my opinion, it could be only with respect to one principal employer, because I don't think we can have multiple license for serving multiple principal employers. It is not possible. Then direct liability, it was lashed on the contractors for providing amenities to the contract workers. Only if the contractors fail, the liability fell on the principal employers, right? But now under the codes, the amenities are to be provided by the principal employers to the contract workers. So it is directly on the principal employers now. And again, interstate migrant workers, they were earlier contract workers, right? So only contract workers were considered to be interstate migrant workers if they were hired in one state to be deployed in an establishment which is situated in a different state. That is that was the definition earlier. So for a person to become interstate migrant worker, they should be the contract labor in the first place, right? But now it is not just the contract workers, even the direct employees, if they are hired from a different state, they can also be considered as interstate migrant workers, right? But the catch is, if they are drawing a salary of more than 18,000 per month, then they would not be treated as the interstate migrant workers, whether it is contract worker or direct employee. If they are drawing more than 18,000, then they will not be considered as interstate migrant workers. I move on. Yeah. So now on your screens,
Sir,
you are
sorry to interrupt for a minute.
yeah.
Can we just pause for a minute? Actually, there is a screen on the small screen on the left hand side. If we can close that. the screen shared?
Please bear with me, no?
Okay. Now is it okay there?
Is it all right, Shreya, now?
Yeah. Yes, yes, perfect, sir.
Right, okay, I'm sorry.
Thank
I'm sorry.
you.
Yeah. Right, okay, I just go ahead. So this is on interstate migrant workers. So earlier, for the applicability of Interstate Migrant Workmen Act, the threshold was 5. Right. So 5 persons, contract workers, if hired in one state and posted to work in another state, and if the minimum number is 5, then for that establishment, the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act was applicable. Right. That threshold number is now getting increased to 10. So that is the change. And the second point is, I think we already discussed, they need not be contract workers, right? Even the direct workers can become the interstate migrant workers now, provided their salaries are less than 18,000 per month. And with respect to the interstate migrant workers, in case if they probably have some accident which is fatal or which ends up in serious bodily injury, then the report is to be submitted in both the places, to the authority in his home state as well as to the authority in the place where he is working. And the information shall also be passed on to the kith and kin of the worker. That is also to be done. And earlier, there was a provision of making payment of displacement allowance. So this was done only once at the time when he moved from his home state to another state for employment purpose. Only at that time it was paid. But now I think that is also removed. Employers are not required to pay a displacement allowance. And journey allowance, yeah, it is a kind of annual payment, right? So every year this is to be paid, not only for the interstate migrant worker, but also for his family members to enable him to go back to his home state and come back. So that is the idea. So every year this is to be paid. And benefits of public distribution system. Earlier it was not available, but now, yes, the option choice will be given to the interstate migrant worker. He can avail it in his home state or in the destination state. It is his choice. And the appropriate governments are expected to extend toll-free helpline to interstate migrant workers, for which I think these governments have to come up with a scheme. Yeah. Now it is with respect to the factories. Again, we know in case if the manufacturing process is carried on with the aid of power, then at least 10 persons are required for that premises to become factory. Similarly, if it is carried out without the aid of power, then minimum 20 persons were required, right? There were 2 thresholds, 10 and 20. Now that thresholds, it is getting changed to 20 and 40, right? I think again this will be useful definitely for people, companies in the MSME sector. So up to 19, in case if they are using the power, they need not register themselves as factory. Similarly, if the manufacturing process is carried out without the aid of power, up to 39, they need not register themselves as under Factories Act, right? So that is going to be a major change. Then working hours, earlier maximum 9 hours per day and 48 hours per week. It was allowed, but under the codes, it is going to be 8 hours per day and 48 hours per week. Then spread over, earlier it was 10.5 hours, right? But of course, it can be extended till 12 with the special permission of the authority concerned. But now the code itself provides for going up to 12 hours. That is, the spread over working hours and intervals can go up to 12 hours. And for a worker to become eligible for leave, I think that person should have worked for at least 240 days in a calendar year, right? So that that person will become eligible for leave at the rate of 1 day for every 20 days of work performed to be availed in the subsequent years. Now, the qualifying period of 240 days, that is getting reduced to 180 days. So that this provision will be definitely in favor of the workmen. And leave encashment, earlier it was not allowed, only at the time of cessation, but now it is possible at the end of the calendar year, right? Apart from the unavailed leave, which would be encashed at the time of cessation of service. And twice the ordinary rate of wages that would be paid in case of overtime. But how to calculate it, I think we discussed in detail during probably during our earlier discussions, initial discussions. So the 50% rule will be applicable. Based on that only, the quantum of wage is to be arrived. Then that is to be divided by 26. Then that is to be divided by the number of working hours per day. Then women workers, I think there was a restriction for engaging them after 7 p.m. before 6 a.m. Right? Under earlier section 66 1B, there was a restriction. But now through the courts that is removed, they can women workers can be employed during the night shifts. It is possible. But of course, the individual consent is to be obtained and the safety measures are to be provided. Right? Whatever I think we have under Sexual Harassment Act, also certain aspects are prescribed. All those things are to be followed. And creche was mandatory if there were 30 or more women workers engaged in a factory. Now, instead of 30 or more women workers, it is becoming 50 plus workers. It is more gender neutral now, irrespective whether that factory or even establishment is covered under ESI or not. If there are 50 plus workers, 50 plus employees, then the employer shall provide creche. Right. But of course, more than one employer can join together and have common creche. That is also possible. But what is to be ensured is the creche shall be situated within a distance of 500 meters. Right. And the board of directors, there will be a mix of whole-time directors and independent directors. Only the whole-time director can be nominated as an occupier. Right. It is again explicit under the courts. The independent director cannot be made as or cannot be nominated as an occupier for a factory. And for appointment of safety officer, the threshold number of workers was earlier 1,000. It is becoming 500. Similarly, for appointment of welfare officer, it was 500. Now it is becoming 250. And for providing canteen, there must be at least minimum of 250 workers. That is coming down to 100 now. So these are all certain changes with respect to factories. Then on plantations. So the Act, Plantations Labour Act, it was applicable to plantations with more than 15 workers or the extent of land if it is more than 5 hectares, right? That more than 5 hectares, that is continuing. But instead of 15 plus, now it is reduced to 10 plus. There are 10 or more workers with the extent of 5 or more hectares of land where the plantation is work is done. Then the Plantation Labour Act or the Plantations Labour portion under the Occupational Safety Code would be applicable. And earlier, for the workers working in the plantations, the medical facilities were provided by the employers themselves. Right? It was a mandate under the Plantations Labour Act. They were not covered under ESI. Now, the option is given to the employers. They can switch over to ESI. So it is not a mandate. It is an option. If the employer feels that it is whatever they are providing is not adequate, they can shift to ESI. Right? So voluntary coverage is possible. On a later stage, if they want to withdraw from the coverage of ESI, that can also be done. That is possible. Then canteen. Earlier, if there are 150 or more workers employed in a plantation, then there must be a canteen. Now that is getting reduced to 100 or more, right? Instead of 150, the threshold limit is coming down to 100. And women workers, night shift, I think common provision only. The same thing will be applicable like factories for plantations also. And again, creche, if there are 50 or more employees, irrespective of male or female employees, I think the creche is to be provided by the employer of the plantation or the owner of the plantation. And what you are seeing now is with respect to motor transport workers, there are certain changes. Again, earlier for its applicability, the threshold number of workers, it was 5. Now that is getting increased to 10 or more, right? Otherwise, I think most of the points are common changes only. 8 hours per day and 48 hours per week. Same thing continues. And for overtime, what we discussed for overtime, the same thing will continue. But of course, twice the rate of wages is to be paid. Earlier in some states, of times it was allowed, but now in all states it should be at least twice the rate of ordinary wages. That is how it is going to be. And for leave eligibility, instead of 240 days qualifying service, now it is becoming 180 days, like we discussed for the factories. Almost all the positions are, provisions are same. So the women employees can be engaged after 7 p.m. And before 6 a.m. But of course, with their consent, and safety measures are to be extended for them. Now, yeah, so there are certain other areas also under Occupational Safety Code: BD and cigar workers, working journalists, sales promotion employees, building and other construction workers, and audio visual workers. Earlier, they were known as cine workers, right? But I think 1 or 2 changes are there in all areas, but they were not significant changes. So, but let us understand that these things will also become part of Occupational Safety Code, right? I just move on. Registration of establishments, yes, it is going to be one registration, right? One establishment, one registration, and it applies to all establishments with 10 or more workers, right? It will be mandatory electronic registration through Sham Suvidha portal, and existing registrations under repealed laws remain valid if details are updated on the portal, right? But of course, we may have to wait for the rules for implementing all these aspects. But let us be aware, under the 13 legislations which are getting subsumed into Occupational Safety Code, there are 6 different registrations prescribed. Under Factories Act, under Mines Act, under Contract Labor Act, under ISMW Act, under BOCW Act, right? There are 6 such registrations. Now, the idea is it is sufficient if we have one common registration post the implementation of the codes. And appointment orders, earlier it was not mandatory, right? Issue of appointment orders, it was not a mandate either under the Factories Act or under the state-specific shops and establishments, except again 1 or 2 states, right? Now it is a statutory mandate. Every employer is now legally required to issue a letter of appointment to every employee, right? And applies to all employees in any establishment covered by the code. And existing employees who were not issued a letter must be given one appointment letter within 3 months, right? Must be in a prescribed format. Yes, the rules are prescribed, coming up with formats for issuing the appointment orders. Then common license, again we discuss a single common license for factory, BD and cigar, and the contract labor. It says under the provisions, it is possible to have a common license, but how this can be done, again, we may have to wait for the rules to be released, but it also says that it will have 5-year validity, not for just 1 year. And necessarily it must be by way of electronic application only. It is not manually possible. And if for 45 days, the authority remains silent, then it is deemed issued the license. And mostly these forms will be uniform. So license forms are designed to be, as far as practicable, similar throughout the country, right? The idea is to bring in uniformity. Then third-party audit, the provision is given for this also. So apart from the government agencies, so the experts will be identified, and a panel will be formed to do the third-party audit. This is with respect to specific classes of establishments, or it can also be extended to the startups, right? So once the audit is done, the report will be submitted to the employer concerned as well as the inspector cum facilitator concerned, right? Then once the certificate is given, I think there is a possibility that that establishment could get exemption from normal departmental inspections. That is also possible depending upon the score, right? Another idea is based on the reports, the appropriate governments may come up with amendments in the codes or the rules to be framed under the codes. So this is the idea under for introducing the third-party audit under Section 36 of the Occupational Safety Code. Then health examination, again, it is going to be a mandate. Whoever is more than 45 years of age, particularly with respect to factories, mines, docks, and building and other construction work. So wherever they are involved in these things, then for them, the annual health examination is to be done by the employer. The cost is to be borne by the employer, and it should be done within 120 days after the beginning of the calendar year. That is before April 30th. And the employer is supposed to maintain the records under these. And yeah, both the terms employee and worker, both are used under the occupational safety. Again, I would like to draw your attention to the second point. It is very specifically mentioned under the employee semi-skill, whereas it is missing under worker. And last three, supervisors drawing more than 18,000, they would be considered as employees only. Whereas supervisors drawing 18,000 or less than 18,000, they would be considered as workers. And whoever is involved in managerial job or administrative job, those persons would be considered as employees only. They will not come under workers. Whereas working journalists and sales promotion employees, they would be considered as workers. Of course, all the workers would be deemed as employees for different purposes, wherever it is mentioned. Yeah, just to recap, for single registration and a common license, it is prescribed under the Occupational Safety Code. The definition for the term factory is changed. That is the threshold. Instead of 10 and 20, it is becoming 20 and 40. And overtime, earlier it was an obligation on the part of the workers to do overtime. Refusal to do overtime was considered to be a misconduct, right? That position is now changing. Overtime, it can be provided or allotted to the worker. Otherwise, it is not possible. And women workers can be employed during night time, of course, again, with their consent only. And eligibility for leave, instead of 240 days, it is coming down to 180 days. And the threshold limit for providing various amenities or the appointment of safety officers, the welfare officers, the canteen, providing canteen, all those things are coming down now. And amenities for third gender, like we provide for men and women separately now, in future, we may have to provide it for men, women, and the third gender separately. And the threshold for contract labor, it is becoming 50 from 20. And core activity is defined, and engagement of contract workers in the core activities, it is prohibited also. And regular employees of the contractor, they will not be considered as contract workers. And ISMW, yes, the definition is changed. Even the direct employees can become the interested migrant worker, provided they draw a salary of less than 18,000 per month. Appointment orders are made as mandate. Health examination, now it is compulsory. Yeah, I think these are all other changes, not only with respect to occupational safety, it applies to other codes also. Deemed approval provision, it is introduced. Compounding of offences for the first time only, if the offence does not involve the punishment of imprisonment, then for the first time alone, the employer can pay 50% of the maximum fine prescribed, then come out of that offence. And maintenance of records, it can be done electronically now. And online submission of returns and applications, it is introduced. And yes, from inspectors, now they would be known as inspectors come facilitators. I think we have come to the end. Thank you so much. I think you will, you would have got at least the highlights of the changes. between the erstwhile 13 legislations and the Occupational Safety Code. Now it is back to you, Shreya.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So we are having a lot of questions.
Uh,
Uh, I'll be
we
taking
can
a
take
few.
up a few.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. First question, I'm taking from down. Is it necessary to issue a fresh appointment order to existing employee as per the new code?
Not necessary, but we may have to wait for the rules in case if they are prescribing certain fields which are not found in the already provided appointment order, then we may have to include that alone. It is not necessary to issue fresh orders.
Okay. Next question. How to clearly demarcate between employee and worker other than managerial and administrative?
No, as I said, when I say the employee definition is broader. The term employee will include workers also for different purposes, right? But where in the provision specifically it is mentioned as workers, it will not be applicable to managers. It will not be applicable to the persons who are doing the administrative jobs. It will not be applicable to supervisors who are drawing more than 18,000. That is how, when it comes to the question of application, we may have to look at it.
Okay, understood, sir.
And all the three codes, they have defined the terms both employee and worker. The code on social security alone uses the term only employee. The term worker is not defined under code on social security. Just additional information.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
How many number of days on leave can be carried forward?
Come again? I don't hear you.
How many number of days on leaves can be carried forward?
Yeah, see, under the
Or
Occupational Safety Code, it comes up with a provision for carrying over to the next calendar year. And the maximum number of days of leave which can be carried over is 30. In case if a particular worker has 35 days of credit, only 30 will be carried over to the next year. The balance 5 days, that is to be encashed. I think for that point only, I probably discussed on the definition, based on the definition of the term wages, as to how to calculate the leave encashment amount and make the payment. Because now, if they have excess leave, earlier it was, I think it got lapsed. Only 30 days would be carried over, particularly in factories. More than 30 days, if they have, that got lapsed. But now that should be encashed. For calculating that only, in fact, how to do that, I was explaining.
okay.
So the
Next,
maximum number of days which can be carried over from one calendar year is 30.
30.
The excess number of days, if it is there, then that should be encashed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. We have 1 hour break. One person is asking, they have 1 hour break. Is it included in 48 hours in week or excluded?
No, 48 hours per week is the exclusive working hours. It is not included there. 8 hours per day, it is specifically working hours. It does not include the rest interval. Similarly, 48 hours per week, it is exclusive working hours in a week. It does not include the intervals. When we include interval, then we would call it as spread over. Yeah.
Okay. So the one break which we say that is not being considered in 48 hours. It has to be apart from that. Next question is, director can be considered as employee?
Your voice is breaking, Shreya.
Hello? Am I
Yeah,
audible now, sir?
now it is clear.
Director can be considered as employee?
I don't hear you continuously. Some disturbance.
Hello. Is it fine now, sir? Now
Can
am I audible, sir?
can Morally read it out?
Yeah. Now am I audible, sir?
Audible, but I'm not able to hear you continuously. Words are not clear.
Okay. There's a next question. They're
Now,
asking if director can be considered as employee.
employee.
Yes, sir.
Directors in the board will not be considered as an employee. Whereas if a designation is given as director, then they can become an employee, possible.
Okay. I'll take one more.
Yeah.
Earlier, some states were exempted from ESI. Under the new code, is that mean all the states are mandatory to opt for ESIC?
Earlier,
Earlier, some states were exempted from ESIC.
no, I don't get to a second word. Earlier, after that, what you're saying?
Some, some states, few states
Okay.
were exempted from ESIC.
Ah. No,
So
now
in the new,
it is applicable everywhere. There is no geographical restriction
okay,
for
understood, sir.
ESI.
Okay. So we are having other questions also, but I think we can address them over a mail, sir. Right?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much.
thank
And
you, sir.
thanks to every participant for their patient listening. And I hope they would have got at least a few takeaways. Thank you. Best wishes to every one of you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir, and
Yeah.
thank you for the participations. Thank you, sir, for making us this subject such an easy thing to understand over the wages, leave encashment, and everything. It was a very thoughtful session, sir. Thank you,
Yeah.
and thank you for
Yes,
participation
Shreya.
for the
Yeah.
hearing.